High gold. Top secret. Do not distribute. Erraticus Project number 3. The Dark Heart. Be warned. By continuing with reading this document, you agree to the strictures of absolute secrecy. You agree to speak to no other individual who is not also read in to this and all related documents. To ascertain this, you will use the following call and response code. Call. It is only in the minds of mortals. Response. That darkness can truly thrive. You will record no notes unless they are on a high gold secured server. You will in no way distribute the knowledge of anything related to the knowledge of the contents of this file. Failure to adhere to these strictures will result in immediate disciplinary action of at least conversion to servitorship. Imperial Report, Dark Heart and the Gallivant Initiative. Author, Esteban Oron. Date, Haku 11, 458 UG. Project Start, Fafnir 27, 430 UG. Structure. The Dark Heart was originally composed of 24 core entities, named Alpha through Omega, each comprised of a singular nanite core. This core was composed of scientific, magical, and redacted materials and systems. The goal of this was to create a basis designed to seek out and expand through matter replication. In short, each nanite is unique in that it uses magical formula derived from redacted theorems and materials to break down and reinvent any matter, antimatter, or energy it encounters in order to reassemble it to meet the needs of the core entity. While this basic idea is common with all self-replicating nanomachines, the exact methods and means used by the Dark Heart are uniquely efficient and capable, putting these nanites on a level far above any other observed to date. It also means that considerably smaller clusters of nanites are capable of creating far more complex effects than would normally be possible. This is necessary to store the entire artificial minds of the 24 core entities onto extremely small clusters, each approximately 2 inches wide and 5 inches long, in the shape of a shard of black glass. These cores were not programmed by traditional means. Instead, they were given a single set of instructions: protect the Empire from all threats, obey redacted in all things. In all other things, the entities were allowed to program themselves, so long as they did so with the goal of protecting the Empire. These were initially done in the laboratory at Imperial Secure Experimentation Site 2, located on planet Hunway Prime, previously known as Vion, in the Gamma Quadrant. This planet was chosen due to its unusually high instance of redacted, as it was the seat of the redacted before the Unification Wars. This was crucial in the creation of the base nanite design, which have been designated as Typhoon class. The other crucial element of construction was the heavy use of cryogenics, as it was necessary to keep the nanites under control. The other reason that this planet was chosen was the presence of the hive factories of the Pike clan that produced cryogenic materials and technologies. The initial Typhoon-class nanites were limited in their ability to replicate perfectly, as a means of keeping them from growing grossly out of control, as the initial Typhoon nanites were considered to be too perfectly made for their purpose, and an unintended gray goo scenario was to be avoided. Upon completion of the 24 primary entities, which have been designated Typhoon A, it was determined that the individual entities were far too fractious to be relied on to cooperate fully, and a 25th entity, known as Ouroboros, was created and given the designation as the Prince. While Ouroboros had no ability to invent or create on its own, it was designed to be purely analytical and cooperative, acting as the tiebreaker and enforcer among the other nanites. These 25 entities were taken to the planet Elion, a rogue planet in the Gamma Quadrant. During the trip, it was detected that the entities gave off a constant level of entirely unique, non-ionizing radiation while not in use. This radiation is detectable by sophisticated modifications that can be made to most standard sensors. Deployment began on Ghidorah 30-445. The planet Elion was chosen as the starting point, as it was at one point a planet controlled by the Null Confederacy. After the Nulls were put down, the planet was left charred of all surface life, but otherwise intact and mineral-rich. The lack of nearby inhabited star systems also made it ideal in terms of secrecy. It was discovered upon arrival that there were small pockets of rogue Nulls still living under the surface, the total population being not more than 10,000 individuals. This population was deemed expendable, and the nanites were deployed immediately and without warning. The first to be deployed was Ouroboros, given a head start, as it were, to ensure it would have the material and physical space to have the processing power to maintain dominance over the other entities. It was deployed into the largest population center of the remaining Nulls in order to take advantage of the already processed materials. Population center had an initial count of about 5,500 individuals, all of which were entirely consumed by Ouroboros within 20 hours of release. All communication on the planet were cut off, and any ship attempting to flee was shot down and purposely crashed back onto the surface of the planet. Each of the remaining entities was allowed to choose their own implementation site. Most chose remaining population centers or areas dense in desirable rare materials, with one exception. The entity designated Epsilon, often referred to as the Archivist, chose to be implemented as far from living beings as possible, resulting in a stunted growth cycle compared to other entities who chose more advantageous places. However, due to this altered cycle, it is theorized Epsilon would have turned out considerably different. Over time, almost all of the main entities began constructing smaller, less powerful nodes, which have been called scions. These act under the main entity's direction and help to process larger amounts of data and material. It is then unknown precisely how they are organized, specifically. Again, the only one not to enact this sort of structure was Epsilon. Attempts were made during the assimilation process to discover why Epsilon remained different from the others, but all probes were destroyed or denied when they attempted to take deeper scans of the planet. All told, it took 124 hours, Cilia 5-445 UG, for the surface to be completely covered, and another 305 hours to convert the entire planet, Cilia 12-445 UG. Upon being notified that the conversion process had been completed, the Empress issued two commands. The first, the entities were not allowed to colonize any further planets, only bringing in small asteroids for repair and maintenance. Ouroboros responded with an affirmative. The second command was simply begin. At this time, the Darkheart disappeared. Later analysis indicated it had teleported its entire mass to a then unknown location. It was learned later that this location was just on the outer rim of the Alpha Quadrant. However, it remained unknown as to where the Darkheart had gone at that time. We could detect that it was present and active within the galaxy by tracking the unique radiation the 25 primary entities give off, later named Farchild radiation, after the researcher who fully described it. Haku 12-445 UG. Exactly 30 days after disappearing, reports from the Alpha Quadrant began coming in. scattered reports of systems simply going dark. Investigation proved fruitless, as any dispatched ship was lost. 5 days after the initial report, the Empress herself journeyed to investigate, Haku 17, 445 UG. She used her own magic to portal to an affected planet and was outside of communications for 17 minutes. When she returned, she was severely injured, visibly aged, and fell unconscious as soon as she stepped through her portal. The Empress was seemingly comatose for a total of 16 days, during which time the Golden Veil Protocol was enacted, Haku 17 to Coatl 3, 445 UG. The Empress was subjected to every test and procedure her medical staff could imagine, all under the watchful eye of the custodians. In the end, it was determined the Empress had been infected by the Typhoon nanites, indicating she had come into direct contact with one or more of the core entities. All attempts to destroy or purge these nanites was limited in success, though the nanites created by the Typhoon class, now referred to as Typhoon B, showed a vulnerability to sonic energy. In the end, some hitherto unknown aspect of the Empress's inborn magic or biology was able to reject the Typhoon nanites and all of their progeny. The Empress awoke on her own, though deeply depleted. She had lost nearly all body fat, suffered significant damage to nearly every organ in her thoracic cavity, and lost approximately half of her bone mass to nanite infection. The exact methods of how she survived are unknown. In the time the Empress was unconscious, according to the Golden Veil Protocol, the Remnant AI was activated and kept up appearances to maintain stability in the Empire. The Remnant AI announced an unknown phenomena was overtaking the Alpha Quadrant and immediately declared a full quarantine of the entire quadrant. The black hole relays were remotely shut down, and a military blockade along most of the drift routes was instituted. Upon her awakening, the Empress affirmed the Remnant's AI's orders, and that ordered the Golden Veil Protocol continue until she was fully recovered. The protocol remained in effect for 22 days, Coatl 3 to Coatl 25, 445 UG. Inquisitorial analysis indicates that there was a less than 0.01% chance of any information having been leaked during this time, which was an order of magnitude higher than the allowable chance. As such, a Black Inquisition was performed by the Shadow Corps and was put into effect in order to thoroughly scrub any instance of leaked information. Later reports indicated this was sufficient to maintain the veil. By the time the Empress was fully back in control of the Empire, Remnant AI had been stood down, and we were able to get further reports from the Alpha Quadrant. The Dark Heart, as it was now known, had taken nearly 50% of the quadrant. Initial reports were unclear, but somehow the Dark Heart was filling space with a loose cloud of nanites, even between solar systems, using an entirely unknown system of delivery. The interstellar nanites were classified as Typhoon C and began to be described entirely as intercepting any known traveling ship, entering the ship's Hydra M collection system, and destroying the ship from inside. Reports from planets taken are vague as they come from hastily transmitted messages, and no official reports survived to make it out of the system. It seems the Darkheart's method of planetary conquest was straightforward. Darkheart would infect an asteroid with what are now known as Typhoon D nanites, and then, through an unknown means, teleport the entire asteroid to an unstable orbit above the targeted planet. The rock would fall, breaking apart as it did. The debris would fall over hundreds of miles of usually the most populated sections of the planet, and the nanites would begin infecting the people. Reports indicate that the infected would begin by being reduced to little more than puppets, acting on a set of predetermined responses. The library of responses was impressively large, but it was far from all-encompassing. It was sufficient, however, to keep the subject functioning and acting to assist the invasion until they could be assimilated into independent thinking individuals, often referred to as the Black Eyes stage, as the presence of Typhoon D would change the eyes of infected in the stage to be fully dark. There were scattered reports of infections progressing further, but no detailed information is available. Shinron 9, 445 UG. As at this time the Empress attempted to contact the Dark Heart via extranet, she sent a single word, "Stop," before the communication network of the Alpha Quadrant collapsed. No further messages were able to be sent. By this time, the longest reaching of the Typhoon C nanites had reached the borders of the Alpha Quadrant, but they progressed no further. It is assumed the Dark Heart took this order to mean to progress no further, and it has restricted itself to the Alpha Quadrant. It is estimated that it had fully assimilated the entire quadrant and all 875 trillion residents who were unable to escape within 150 days of arrival, as it seemed to be functioning on an exponential growth scale. It is further estimated that it would have taken the Dark Heart between 6 months and a year to assimilate the entire galaxy. The Alpha Quadrant was declared officially lost on Fafnir 30, 445 UG. The Empress began the Gallivant Initiative on Cadmus 2, 445 UG, a set of ships and crews designed and trained in order to most effectively deal with the now rogue Darkheart. She also moved up the timetables on the other Erraticus projects and doubled the tithe. The Gallivant Initiative was to be rolled out in 2 phases. The first phase using small, fast scouting ships. The second phase involving more heavily armed and resilient destroyers to accomplish specific missions in Project Apotheosis. The ships were specifically designed to counter Typhoon-class nanites, and as a consequence, became almost impervious to nanite infiltration and to most other forms of electronic and physical infiltration. Gallivants 1 through 5 were given specially designed normal space engines, making them faster than any previous known ship, while also being invisible to all but the most sophisticated of scanners. Later Gallivants would be equipped with the hyperdrift system, a method of drift travel more directly through the ethereal plane instead of skipping along the border as is the normal drift. This method, which is extremely fast, was so loud it was deemed acceptable as an emergency escape option only, the loudness being directly from the intense forms of radiation that ripping through the planar barriers caused. It was also theorized that if this method of travel became widespread, it would begin to weaken and eventually destroy the barrier between planes. Gallivant 6 was created with the Shadow Drive, capable of in-system jumps through large enough areas of sufficient darkness by slipping into the shadow plane and taking advantage of relative geography to travel swiftly and undetectably between planes in the system. This was intended to be able to stealthily travel among infected systems in the Alpha Quadrant and observe or ambush as was needed. This was completed before the Gallivant project was scrapped. Gallivant 7 was designed to have the Gravity Spider, a method of limited faster-than-light that operated by using gravity fluctuations caused by massive celestial bodies, black holes, red giants, and neutron stars. For example, to travel through space normally not accessible through drift or other hyperdrift, this method would be of limited use outside of a dense star field or celestial nursery, or its intended target, the galactic core. The design and prototypes were completed, but the Gallivant project was scrapped before it could be finalized and installed. The Gallivant crews were comprised of members of assorted enhanced soldier programs, with each ship to be crewed by members of the following projects: Ulfadar and Achilles as combat specialists, Mimir as science and analysis, Icarus as pilots, and with members of the Samsara project called from the Shadow Corps as insurance against infiltration. The Samsara agents were given instructions to neutralize any member of their crew in case of infection, including themselves. As Samsara agents are coincidentally especially resistant to infection themselves, it is expected that in the event of infection, they'd be able to carry out their duties before engaging in self-termination. Severe 11, 453 UG. The first wave of scout ships, Galavants 1 through 5, were dispatched to the Alpha Quadrant. All communications were immediately lost, and the ships also presumed lost. At this time, the Galavant project was aborted, and all materials and personnel were reassigned to other Erraticus projects. 164 days, Haku 30, 453 AG, after deployment, there was a signal detected of the use of a hyperdrift engine. However, it is impossible to determine which ship caused this, and no further hyperdrift signals occurred. It is assumed a single ship attempted to enter the hyperdrift and was lost either during or after that occurred. Galavants 1 through 5 were declared lost. The Galavant project has, at this time, been shelved indefinitely. Addendum 1 added Falcor 19 475 UG. Further observation of those infected with Typhoon D showed there are multiple vectors of transformation, but they tend to follow traditional undead forms: zombies, ghouls, devourers, etc. It is also shown that the longer one is infected, the more powerful they become, with some shifting types over time, and others just becoming more powerful in their current form. It has also been demonstrated that while they have an independence of thought and action, the creatures, now being called the Nanite Undead or Typhoons, are connected through a subconscious hive mind. The mindless varieties, like ghouls and morgs, are much less independent and require a locus, a singular being, usually sentient on its own, that acts as a master relay of the Darkheart, and destruction of those loci will result in the dissolution of any typhoons under their control. However, it has been noted that certain creatures called V-type, which are superficially similar to vampires, are very difficult to actually kill. It seems that upon destruction, some portion of them is teleported away and rebuilt with upgrades to make them more resistant to that which killed them. As a whole, Typhoon infected do seem to be susceptible to sonic energy as a result of a crystalline component of their construction. However, it is unknown if any of the more advanced versions share this resistance. In fact, with very few exceptions, nothing more powerful than a Tier 3 Typhoon infected have been seen, though higher tier enemies seem inevitable. Typhoon D nanites are exceptionally difficult to detect, requiring either specialized knowledge of what to look for, or prohibitively sensitive equipment, as the only detectable energy given off by them, especially while dormant, is almost identical to background cosmic noise. It is only in looking for variations in the hydrogen atoms that Typhoon infected can be observed. Tiers of Typhoon infected. Tier 0, Fresh, O-type. Creatures newly infected who have not yet entered the Black Eyes phase. They still retain the basic characteristics of their biology, and in some cases, echoes of their lives and abilities gained while alive. It is assumed that some knowledge of the infected is transmitted to the Darkheart itself. It is theorized that with a rapid enough intervention, a person of this tier could still be saved. To date, there have been no successful instances of this happening besides the infection of the Empress. Type 1, Z-type, and G-type. Creatures infected to the degree that they have their biology more than 50% subsumed. While they may be superficially Similar to their former living self, they are now irrevocably overtaken. Normally, reaching this stage takes several hours, but it is observed that many of the Tier 2 typhoons are capable of engaging in direct infection that speeds the victims to this tier within seconds. These types tend to be straightforward physical attackers, using minorly enhanced tooth and claw. Tier 2, M-type and T-type. Creatures who have been infected to this degree are vastly altered from their original form, given special attack abilities and enhancements to act as shock troops. Two observed varieties are vastly different from each other, both in form and intended function, with M-type seemingly designed to be able to quickly infect individuals and deal with small groups of armed resistance, whereas T-type are larger, heavily armored, and designed seemingly for open warfare, capable of shrugging off staggering amounts of damage through some sort of negation field. T-types, instead of infecting through bite or claw, are designed to release clouds of Typhoon D upon their destruction. It has also been observed that Typhoon of this tier are at least semi-sentient and capable of independent decision-making. They are also capable of being a locust, though if any Tier 3 Typhoon are available, those will likely take the role of locusts, though Tier 2 may be capable of acting as redundant systems. Tier 3, V-type. Only one type has been reported of this tier. These are almost entirely identical to uninfected and retain their own personality, mental abilities, memories, and abilities they had in life. V-type are considered to be primarily infiltrators and officers, directing others and able to pass clearly through sophisticated scanners. In battle, they tend to stay to the back and let their other soldiers do the actual fighting, using a variety of magical abilities to disrupt the battlefield. It is known that V-types have infiltrated the Empire, but as they can only be discovered after destruction, it is unknown to what extent they have done so. As of now, there are no known ways to detect them by sensor. These tiers seem to be almost always acting as a locus for others, and there does seem to be a limit to the number of others they can reliably control, though the limit does seem to vary from individual to individual. Type 4. Unknown. There have been scattered, hastily transmitted reports of something more powerful or perhaps multiple varieties, but to date, no force has survived engagement long enough to provide an accurate report, and none have survived. Ships. The Typhoon nanites can be formed into a ship colony, which allows for individuals to engage in drift travel. Only one pattern of ship has been seen, a medium-sized, black, sectile ship that dissolves into Typhoon S pattern, the nanites upon destruction. They have also seemed to be capable of altering their structure to shift damaged systems, repair damage extremely quickly, and deploy weapons seemingly out of any surface. To date, only 12 of these ships have been successfully destroyed in combat, while they have destroyed hundreds of empirical ships, much larger in size and with, by normal appearances, larger guns. To say they hit above their weight class would be an understatement.